Hello, everyone. Welcome to this session of Speak Now, where we talk about the intersectionality of COVID-19, marginalization, bias, gender, and migration. So in our discussion today, we strive to rediscover heritage as part of the immigrant narrative, recognizing the intersectional nuances within immigrant groups. The discussion will also focus on migration and living in a globalized world with a look into marginalization exacerbated during the new normal under a gender lens. My name is Sabin Muzaffar. I am the executive editor of Ananke, and I am absolutely thrilled to welcome Sanghamitra Bose and Tanushree Ghosh. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sabin.
So I'd like to begin this session with both of you introducing yourselves. So Sanghamitra, please go first.
Sure. And hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Sanghamitra Bose. I'm from India, but I'm based in Singapore. I've been here for about 15 years. I work in a global travel management company, and I live here with my 14-year-old daughter. I'm also a passionate writer. So, this year I published my first book. It's called Unbelonging. You can see it right behind me. It's a collection of short stories based in Southeast Asia, and every story deals with emotional upheaval that's sort of caused as the result of trauma or life-changing experiences. I've lived outside the country for so many years, outside my home country in Singapore and in China before that. And it's allowed me to sort of have some, experience some very unique cultural nuances and the context that then come as a result of that. Also in my organization, I'm very involved with our global diversity, equality, and inclusion initiatives. And that again has allowed me to have some great perspectives on the topics we're going to discuss today. So immigration, gender bias, and living the life of a global citizen. So looking forward to the discussion today, Tanushree and Sabin.
Thank you for that. Tanushree?
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Tanushree Ghosh. I am based in the US now, just like Sanghamitra. I'm from India, but I have been here now for 15 years. I do go back and work from Bangalore. Did that in the pre-COVID years and definitely will resume that soon from time to time. But mostly I'm based in the US Pacific side. I work for a tech company here. I work for Intel, mostly a lot of engineering management and program management, but I am also an author. I mostly write on social justice and gender justice. My first book or first solo author book is right here from another land with Romania. And my second one actually is on gender. It's coming out hopefully this year in December with Sage. So apart from writing, gender is actually why and how I started my writing. So I do have a nonprofit called Her Rights. We try to look at global gender action by connecting and building cohorts between local and national organizations. So that's what I do in a nutshell. Again, just like Sanghamitra, very excited for the discussion here. Migration and its effects and the intersectionalities is very pertinent today. So excited to get started.
Thank you so much for that. And I'll get right into it. While doing my research for this session, I came across a statistic that more than 3% of the world's population, if I'm not mistaken, people are living abroad and they're migrants. This makes international migration a key feature of globalization and a central issue on the international agenda. Many also view it as problematic, as seen in Trump America or the events that led to the Brexit. So that said, migration in itself, if you look at it, it's as old as existence of life on Earth, or rather it's deeply intertwined with life and survival. So I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on this.
Sure. Would you like, Sanghamitra, would you like to go first? Okay. I guess I don't know if I'm stuck on the screen or not, but at least on my screen, I see myself stuck on the screen.
No,
we can hear you.
Okay, okay, fine. So, one of the thing is that my alma mater is Cornell, and just last week I was in a organized e-class by them. And they choose grand challenges to address every year in this university, which is basically a collaboration between multiple departments. This year, they actually chose migration as the grand challenge. And the theme behind that, or the reasoning behind that, is whether you talked about people who have physically been living at different places, but really in today's world, if you think about it, whether you physically move or not, from what you eat to what diseases you get to what happens in your life, it's all because of migration. So in essentiality, one of the key things that they were talking is that you and I might not physically move, but from the food we eat to the diseases we contract, migration affects all of this. And as the climate warms, as the geopolitical conflicts escalate, migration is beyond humans at this point. It's a lot of, from climate to social justice to everything in essentiality is a result of the world population becoming a global population more and more. And my thought on that is that this really needs to be embraced, and there is really no way out of the challenges that we will face and we are facing if we don't think more as a human race and less as individual nations, right? Just think of COVID. What would have happened if, when it was breaking, if the countries didn't go into lockdown in phases, or some countries didn't react late, or even with the vaccines, if there was not a difference in vaccine justice from country to country, what would have happened if we could have reacted as one race versus how it played out? And similarly, for many challenges that every nation faces today, there is no isolation. If you look at Afghanistan, what is going on right now, why should we care if Afghanistan has a severe setback of geopolitical stability or women's right or children's right? It's really because, there is no isolation here. What precedence is set in one nation severely affects every nation, whether you physically move or not. The only thing here, however, is I feel that, like you said, the context on migration or the history is not always very well remembered. People have been dispositioned for ages, and it's really all started with the food production or agriculture getting weaponized, from hunters and gatherers actually moving to producing, and plantations and the colonization. And that really, a lot of that has created what we see as the reality in the world today. And when we talk about, immigrants coming in and they creating problems, even in the US context, data actually shows that the percentage of immigrants as a percentage of US population hasn't changed. However, who is migrating and from where, even though will have very similar human intentions, have very different political contexts. So I think all this needs to be really brutally, honestly looked at, so that we can get ahead of all this, animosity and resistance to change and act more like a one race. That's my thought on that.
True. Yeah, I absolutely agree to everything Tanushree said. And Tanushree, you gave some really interesting context about how migration can happen even when people don't move an inch, right? And I'm going to go back to what you said in the beginning, Sabin. And I that migration is not new. And I think people get caught up in this whole thing that migration is a recent phenomenon. It's not. It's happened for years and eons, and for a variety of reasons, right? Economic, political, religious, whatever. The other fallacy is that migration causes countries to sort of, not grow, or for people to lose jobs. And again, that also is fallacy, because we've got enough data to back it up. I think countries actually grow when you have migrants. Certain, elements of the workforce get created, and that grows. In the short term, you may have, like a wage disparity or an impact on wages, but overall, the economy grows, and therefore, the GDP of the country grows, the per capita income grows. So migration has only sort of, caused countries to grow and led to economic progress. So I think these are two things which there's a general concern about, right? And especially now with in the wake of Afghanistan, what's happening there is again, that question is going to come up. Which countries are accepting refugees, which countries aren't, what does it mean for the host country? And I think one needs to look at it in the context of the fact that, it seems that people think they have a choice. I don't think there is a choice. This is reality. It's a process of economic osmosis. You'll always move from a situation of have not to have. So there's always going to be migration. So I think it's a reality that people need to embrace and countries need to embrace.
Yeah, I agree with you. And like Tanushree said, migration is beyond humans. Why do you think there's been this change in the perception? Because, like we are all discussing, that migration happens from eons of time. But you see, one Western government saying that, we're going to allow so-and-so, or we're, why is that mindset, happening now? Or has this been happening in the 20th and 21st century alone? Because before that, if you look at history, we've had explorers and travelers and whatnot, but why now?
I think scarcity of resources. I mean, it comes down to what's available as resources, right? If you look at the 19th century or even the 18th century, when people migrated to the countries we know today, Australia, US, right? At that time, I think the powers that were migrating firstly were stronger than the natives of the host country. There's one. Secondly, there were enough resources available, and so they migrated, they set up these countries, they developed. Now you've reached a situation where these are all developed countries. There is a scarcity of resource, or there is a certain amount of resource that you may or may not want to share with newcomers. And of course, you've got to overlay the political context on top of it, and which is why you would allow certain people to come in and certain people, and you wouldn't allow others. But I have to say that even if you go back, I would say to the 1950s and to 70s, countries followed different migration policies, right? I mean, in the US, you would allow skilled workers to come in. That was always that immigration policy, whereas countries like Canada or the UK had allowed unskilled workers to come in. The needs were different. So the type of population that migrated to these countries is very different. And even if they have the same ethnicity, there's a big difference in education, in the kind of roles they do in their host country today between, let's say, the US and Canada and UK.
True. Tanushree, would you like?
Yeah, I would say two things. I mostly agree. I just wanted to add a different perspective. So see, migration was always a contentious event. Now, the issue is, like, say, I was reading this book called Open Veins of Latin America. It was talking about how the Latin America was colonized, right? Now, like Sanghamitra said, it's really, there is always conflict, but who is the winner and who is the loser probably is changing a little bit based on, people who were there. And when countries were coming in and colonizing, and there were mass eradication of native population. There was still a conflict, but it was just from the other side of the lens. But even for people coming in, like, for example, in the US after Second World War, there was a lot of animosity against the Japanese population. And there was a lot of, designed discrimination at that point. I do think that, yes, definitely there is an aspect of what is happening resource-wise in the nations, but and how the power dynamics are shifting. But there is also this human situation where whoever is the dominant population at a place, there is always this mindset of, okay, us versus them. That is something that happens. And in what happens is when times get tough, that kind of thinking starts becoming very dominant. And it's not just people who are, if you, for example, if I have left India, there is also this us versus them there. that for people who have left, in terms of, are you really bringing any value back to our country anymore? Or like, maybe it is very easy for you. And I again think that all stems from really a core human behavior of trying to find a situation where we differentiate instead of unifying, and I do think that what is happening today in terms of very highly nationalistic behavior very recently has a lot to do with the economic downturn that we went through 2008, 2009, and on the social conflicts and the countries, like Sanghamitra said, this perceived notion of scarcity of resources and who get the resources, whatever is left, because nations strongly believe that they should prioritize because of logistical implementation, whatever reasons. Now, is there really a scarcity of resources? I have written in my book, in that From Another Land, in the prologue, that at that time, and this has even become bigger now, there are actually surplus jobs in the US. There are factories in Texas which are staying empty because they cannot fill them with workers. At the same time, we are rounding up workers and sending them out, right? It's just because we create a lot of localized implementation of a problem based on what we believe is the right thing to do, which is already based on a wrong premise. Now, I'm not saying that, nations should take in all refugees indiscriminately, or there are obviously some logistical implementation problems there, but the whole concept of, like Sanghamitra said, very rightfully so, scarcity of resources and things getting worse when either people leave the country or migrants come in is an incorrect. There is a lot of data to show that it's an incorrect concept.
Okay, so two things that got my attention. Sanghamitra, we spoke about, migration and the lack of resources. And when you look at history, you see, again, I talk about the explorers and the travelers. They came from countries that were, not, you won't call them the global south, right? These countries never belonged to the global south. Now, most of the migration that is taking place is from the global south. Is that something, which makes this bias and marginalization more pronounced? And the other thing is, you talk about, Tanushree, you talk about the downturn. So, and globalization, migration is part of globalization. So do these things connect, and do these things are symptomatic of what or how migrants are marginalized?
Sanghamitra, why don't you go on the global south question first, and then I will come to my point.
So I think when we look at migration, I think it's a very broad term, right? So there is migration that people do personally, and that the reasons for that are, and again, it's not a recent thing, but over years and over eons, people have migrated for economic reasons, for political, fleeing political oppression, fleeing religious persecution. These have been sort of reasons. Then there is the other type of migration, which is, I would say, institutionalized, which was like your East India Company and, all the Portuguese and the French who all went east, right? The whole idea was, how do they get closer to their, how do they get a better distribution channel and a better sourcing channel, I think, in today's context. Yeah. And how do they go directly to the source and get, what the resources that they wanted? And that sort of colonization and the migration that came with it was a very different type of migration, right? Because again, that's where, like Tanushree said, native populations got eradicated or put into reservations, and the different kind of problems that happened with that. So I think there are different types of migration. Is the first lot not happening? I wouldn't say that. I think we've got silent colonization happening all over the world today. It's just that it's not talked about as much. So that's there, but I would say a big population today is migrating, of course, for economic reasons, but also because of the political situation in different countries. We're seeing with Afghanistan, that's forming a big landscape, or maybe that's what we're hearing. It's also about what media sort of plays up.
True. Tanushree?
Yeah. Yeah, I absolutely agree. That's beautifully said. To my point that you asked me, I think that yes, everything is absolutely related, right? What is happening in Afghanistan today, why US failed, none of these are really something that is sudden, right? But the problem is that we always see the effect and we do not understand the cause, because the cause is very, very complicated. And the cause gets what has really happened recently, I feel, definitely in the US, I think in India also. I was listening to this a viewpoint talk where they were talking about the lines between fact and opinion has blurred, right? There's this saying that everyone can have their own opinion, but there are only certain facts. But with that happening, what has happened is that the cause even gets further dissected, challenged, and even facts that are really facts uh, gets really not people don't get educated on that in which they really should, and therefore they just react on the effect most of the time. And if you react on the effect, you will not be able to see how different conflicts are really causing certain areas to be destabilized, or how, like, the economic downturn, or even in the US, the racial tensions that are continuing, how that is not just a matter of Black men suddenly getting killed by cops, how it's like a decades of, even post civil war and post, like, everyone being equal on paper, how there actually has been decades of policies put in place which definitely disadvantaged just one section consistently against another. And it's very similar to caste in India, similarly. But all of these connections, because they're so complicated, is beyond something that we can probably grasp over a WhatsApp or, like, a social media post. So what happens when we believe that, the resources are scarce and the world is falling apart? The world is really not falling apart. I thought I have been disillusioned recently on, okay, how bad state of the things are. But just think about the world was, or what was happening then, right? The world is, yes, going through turmoils, but the world has always gone through turmoils. I solely believe that there has been tremendous conflicts, and if anything, things are getting lesser and lesser in terms of conflicts, or getting more localized and globalized. COVID was probably the first global event after a long time that is fully, truly global. But if you do start believing that the world is falling apart, and I do understand a very small fraction of that cause and see just certain things, then you will have a very different reaction to that. And that reaction will mostly come from our fight or flight, or how we save ourselves, and not as a race, right? So that I think is where all these intersectional biases of certain segments getting pushed down and down and down, and certain reactions coming against certain population becomes the surface that you see.
True. I absolutely agree with you. So we all know what acculturation process is. I found out while researching, honestly speaking, for this chat. And for our viewers, let me explain. And according to Wikipedia, acculturation is a process of social, psychological, and cultural change that stems from the balancing of two cultures while adapting to the prevailing culture of the society. This process has been linked to changes in daily behavior, as well as numerous changes in psychological and physical well-being. So keeping this in mind, how do we study, perceive, and address experiences of migration, negotiate identities of belonging and transnationality? Sanghamitra?
So I think the first fallacy is that acculturation is like a one-way street. It isn't. It's not just the migrant population that's adapting to the host country. The host country itself is adapting and transforming as migration continues. And Germany is a great example of that. Germany, I think for a very long time has accepted migrants from different countries. And today I was reading, I think it was a report on I think it was an IMF report. And it said that the Turkish doner kebab today is the most popular street food in Germany. right? So you can see, and you can see that acculturation firstly in food and art and culture, and you can see that. So yes, I think it happens both ways, and we will see that, and I think sometimes that is what creates this concern about migration and migrant population. But most, I would say, people who've grown up in the last 20 years are so used to having and working and living with migrant or first or second generation migrant population, that barrier sort of it comes down, and it's going to come down as we move forward, I would think.
Tanushree?
Yeah, acculturation, I believe, is really a beautiful thing if we take it in the sense of what it's supposed to be and not define it very rigidly. Sanghamitra said it beautifully. First of all, it's a two-way street, but the second side is not talked about a lot. There are a lot of things that, like Sanghamitra, I also work a lot in diversity, equity, and inclusion in my day job. It is proven that when you bring in many diverse viewpoints, diverse experiences, diverse things, it's actually the economy grows, human thinking improves, creativity grows, a lot of things come out of it. And it's also common sense. But what happens a lot in a lot of host countries is, again, because of us versus them, acculturation means that you fit in a certain way. Like, just for example, for US citizenship, it is pretty known that, hey, you have to disown the allegiance to your country, and you have to believe in this, hey, whether US is wrong or right, you have to support your allegiance to that. And the same goes for India. And this kind of very nationalist behaviors are very thought processes that are very like, hey, if I have let you into this country, you better behave a certain way. And you better start believing in a certain things. You better start fitting in. You better start adopting our festivals. And you better, of course, yeah, you can practice whatever you want. But why wouldn't, if you don't like what we do here, why would you want to come, right? This, I think, is a very, very unnatural concept. And it's an impossible concept. When you try to force this into people without the full cultural context of who they are and where they're coming from, you actually create very difficult human problems, right? Now, obviously, there needs to be law and order. You have to, if you are coming into a country or if you stay in that country, everyone needs to abide by the laws. Everyone needs to fit into certain things, but you cannot take a human out of the context they brings in. And you cannot just expect them to live a certain way, whether you leave, whether you come, right? And acculturation often, unfortunately, is not thought of as a holistic experience that, look, if this person is coming in, obviously we expect them to respect the laws and understand the country, but they also will not change from who they are. And that is not accepted. That is not accepted, again, because nations truly believe that whoever they are is the best, which is not true at all for any nation. But that evolution is definitely not there, which is a sad thing.
I think that's a great point, of fitting in. And I agree, adoption and adaptation, adapting to where you live and adopting, certain culture, norms and the ways of that society is great. But, assimilating both cultures is the way to go. And this has never been, like you said, there are certain standards and allegiances that you have to, agree with. You have to say, just to show how patriot you are. Even now, in conversations with friends and families who are living in Canada, if they, celebrate their cultural occasion, sometimes people criticize that you've migrated there. And it's sort of like an accusation. Oh, you've migrated to so-and-so country, so why are you doing this? And, over there, they're still accused of being, a migrant. So that's really tough.
Yeah, that is the point, right? I have a lot of stories in my book, which talks about the lost opportunity because of this. Think of it this way. You say that you hire a teacher in your classroom. We were bringing in, or she's coming in with a lot of different experiences. But you tell her that, look, even if you criticize our school, you are fired. So similarly, like, whether I'm talking about, the country I stay in now, whether I'm talking about the country I adopted, US or India, if the expectation is that, look, if you are bringing in perspectives, but you better not point as our flaws, and that's the only way of showing your love, or, you have left, so do not point our flaws out, then how will anyone improve?
True.
You are losing an opportunity here. Now, yeah, people might be wrong when they bring out their points and opportunities. But if you basically say that, like, like a frog in a well, that, hey, you know what? You are coming in, and only way I will believe you love me if you never criticize me, right? And, to the extent of getting to a point here, if you think about a lot of the expectations that were often put out of Muslims in India, is that, if you have to show that you are loyal to India, no matter what happens to you, never speak up and criticize something. Now, obviously, India is a very liberal country in a lot of respects, and there is a lot of religious freedom. And I'm not saying everyone does that. But similarly, out of people who have settled in the US, if it's like, if US is going to war, and I really think it's the wrong thing to do, and I understand why it's a very wrong thing to do even for US. And my point of view is coming from genuine concern for US. But I have said that, look, you know what? Whatever happens, you don't criticize your family. Will you be really doing the right thing for your family? Will you be doing really the right thing for your friend? No, right? So just because someone criticizes a nation or criticizes something happening has nothing to do with their allegiance towards that, their love, their adoption. And if you kind of force people, this causes, Sanghamitra's book, maybe, I don't know the title, this causes the unbelonging,
Indeed.
I
True.
feel.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Sanghamitra?
No, I think Tanushree said it so beautifully. When you were speaking, I was just thinking that I think nationality and culture are two different things. You could still, like I said, have allegiance towards a nation, but you can always bring your own cultural context to it. Conversely, though, sometimes we always feel that people carry their cultural heritage onwards, and that's where they, that process of assimilation happens. But in some cases, they may not want to. I mean, this could be an opportunity to re-identify themselves, or completely change that identity that they had back in their home country. I was reading this book by Kavita Puri. It's called Partition Voices, where she's interviewed survivors of the partition of India and Pakistan. And obviously, all those people are, in their 80s and 90s almost today. But as she interviewed them, the interesting part was that most of their family did not know that they had gone through this, through this whole event and all the incidents that happened with it. And a big part of that was, the conscious effort on the part of the survivors not to talk about it, not to tell their families about the trauma. So they almost sort of transformed themselves and created new identities for themselves, in the UK. And so by doing this, I mean, their families got to know them better and got to understand the cultural context they came from. But this is a sort of a example of how you can consciously reinvent yourself because you want to.
Yeah, and I think that part actually this is a wonderful point. Many people who are migrating out and in actually do adapt. They change as humans, and they basically, the reason they are there is because there is certain, of course, many times, many folks don't have a choice when they got displaced, but anytime it's by choice, or at least the intention to stay, continue to stay has been by choice, there is a lot of adoption of values they do want to pick up. And there is a lot of growth as human beings in different dimensions. And I think that is the beautiful opportunity of acculturation. But the opposite happens quite slowly and is often faced with a strong resistance in terms of, again, this suspicion, this fear of us versus them comes in very strongly there. And like you said, Sabin, often, when I write about gender in India, or my first article on Huffington Post, it was criticized very heavily because a lot of Indians felt that I am being paid by Western media to talk about the Nirvaya gang rape in a bad light. The issue is that I was doing that only for India. First of all, no one pays for writing op-eds. I think that there's a big misconception of who Western media pays and how in these cases. But the issue was not, what was very eye-opening to me was that even though the state of gender at India, or that was a very horrendous event, is not debatable, right? But who the perspective is coming from, and this point of like, this honor, which moves from family to nation, in terms of I might have problems, but my honor is more important, is actually very damaging. And I personally feel when it comes to this migration or the opportunities lost, this has disserviced gender tremendously. This has disserviced women's rights tremendously. I studied a lot for my second book, The Feminism, the History of Feminism in India and the History of Feminism globally in the world. I personally feel, and this is, I have written a lot that written in my book about this, that India has always has tremendous gender movements. And contrary to popular beliefs, India probably has one of the most comprehensive laws. There is no shortage of laws when it comes to now. However, a lot of those laws are obviously struggling with implementation and has a very generic definitions, subjective definitions. But that being said, what has happened is gender has consistently become secondary in India to class, caste, corruption. Again, if you think of it, gender gets dissected into us versus them based on who we are talking about. So in the movements in Bombay that happened, gender became a class issue, that, rich woman versus poor woman. Gender often becomes an issue of caste, because obviously lower caste or certain caste women have a very differentiated and worsened effect. No one is denying that, but if we dissect the problem statement because of that, we lose our opportunity. Happening in the US, I have been in certain panels where it was a gender event put together by women of all color, but there is just so much hurt in Black women that it became a white versus Black woman statement against a gender statement. So that's that there. Yeah.
And let's not forget about, internally displaced women, internally displaced persons, but I'm saying, because we're talking about gender, how, problematic this migration is. And that's my next question. How does migration impact gender and migrant life, especially, when you take the gender context?
I think genders move very differently in migration. The experience of the male gender is very different from that of the woman gender. In many ways, sometimes good, sometimes bad, right? It's for the woman, sometimes it's an opportunity to, again, reinvent themselves and maybe shed some of the traditional roles they had back home. Sometimes it's not even a choice. The economic situation is such that they have to do that. So gender roles change definitely with migration at both ends, but I think with women, it changes even more. It's not just the external change of maybe getting a job if they didn't have one, or getting educated if they weren't, but it's also the dynamics, the internal dynamics of the family that changes in a migrant situation, because no longer do you have the extended family that kind of lays down the cultural or the social context. You are a unit within yourselves, and you could make that change and you could change the dynamics. Conversely, sometimes you migrate, but you go and you settle into a community from your home country, which is probably a few years back in terms of the kind of customs, etc. that follow. So sometimes you go from a less traditional kind of community to a far more traditional community, simply because you move countries, but you haven't really moved your cultural context.
Yeah.
So and I think that women kind of obviously fare differently in that migration.
Tanushree?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the first point to make here, I think Sanghamitra really covered both aspects, not much to add. One point to, however, say is not just migration, any kind of conflict or turmoil affects genders very differently. Anytime there's been historical conflict, women has fared much worse, because anytime there's scarcity of resources, it is the women who have been pounded, and also women has been used as tools for conquest. If you look at Rwanda, rape has been a tool for genocide, and not just in Rwanda, that has been happening historically. Violence on women is basically something that escalates anything that is a context. If you look at COVID, what has happened worldwide, and in US, we're talking about this a lot, is they say that the women's progress has gone back to 80s. Forbes published a report saying that of the 1 million jobs lost, almost all of it was women, and most of it cannot come back, mostly because they don't have the ecosystem around them to take care of the child care responsibilities. Now, why is that? It is because systemically, women have been kept from having the certain kind of education that has higher paying jobs. More often than not, they have had to start their career late or fight for that. In career, when they have started, they haven't had the more advancement opportunities. So what has ended up happening is when a family has to make a choice for any kind of crisis, that one of the income needs to go, because there has to be childcare, there has to be elderly care. It's an economical decision that often the lesser one will go, the more disposable one will go. This is just one example of how there is a very differentiated effect of any kind of event between the two genders. Now, similarly, men has to have a brunt of that also in an opposite way. Migration, like Sanghamitra said, I believe has created severe opportunities for women. There has been a lot of examples of women have come from places where they were restricted in many different ways, have been able to become very different person. It has been personal growth. It has also been growth of communities. There has been also a lot of opposite effects of women. There has been a lot of opposite effects on what opportunity could be availed by women versus what couldn't. And again, because of migration, when the job profiles change, it has affected men and women very differently. So there is definitely a very big gender component there. But I think what we should think about is the opportunity. One of the things we should understand now that the world is so global and all the information is out there is, like Martin Luther King said, injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. If you have certain nations where women, are extremely restricted in freedom, they cannot do anything. Or if you have most nations in the world not having laws even against sexual violence, even if you create isolated ecosystems of progress in a global world, that will not sustain. So we need to understand that.
One thing
you're only as good as your weakest link, right?
yeah, exactly. One thing that comes to my mind, we're talking about, care work, and when you talk about transnational migration, especially for employment, and you talk about transnational workers, let's talk about domestic workers. These women are, part of an informal labor market. And when you bring in the COVID aspect, how do you think that has marginalized these women? And they're part of a care chain, because back home they're sending money, for their families, and they have, their kids are there who are being perhaps taken care of by their elderly women, their mothers or grandmothers. So how has this all impacted the transnational female worker, migration and COVID?
So I, not as well as one would, naturally imagine. So in Singapore, we have quite a large population of, they call them foreign domestic workers. So these women who come and stay with you in your house and work. I mean, I have a foreign domestic worker myself who's been an invaluable part of my family for the last 10 years. You see that a lot in, this part of the world, of course, and of course in the Middle East as well.
Yes.
Right, where whenever you think of them, you always have this sort of thing in your heart, because these are people going and staying in stranger families, in a domestic environment, and there is always that risk of everything, like personal violation, of not being treated well, not being fed well, right? These are the common things that you hear. With COVID, what happened is that they couldn't go home. So usually maybe they would go home once every 2 years, or once in a year, or even once in 6 months. But they were not able to do that, right? So then, one feels that one feels that they should have a social network, but they usually don't. They don't have such a wide social network. Their network is talking to their family on the phone. True. That's the network, right? And they're doing that a few times a day. But that when that's not supplemented with a visit home, etc., it gets very traumatic. So I think they went. I think they're going through a much more severe sort of trauma because of COVID than the rest of us, I would think, because you're really so far away from your home, and you can't leave the job and go home because and like I said, the village depends upon your salary here. Yeah. And it's. Yeah, so yes, it's not been a great story. We've heard many horror stories of helpers not being fed, like simple things, right? They don't get enough food to eat. They're losing weight. They fall ill. No one takes to the hospital. So the circle goes on. And there's a story in my book Unbelonging called Redemption, which is exactly that. And I was actually driven to write it because you see so many such cases. You see families really taking care of their foreign domestic worker, and then you see families that lock up their foreign domestic workers when they leave home, or leave them. They go off on a holiday and leave them with 5 Maggie packets and no money. Yes, wow. Things like that. So you have horror stories, and then this is not. I don't think this is part of the world. It's just a question of what you can do without any repercussion. It's a level of bullying that you can do on a person when there's no repercussion. So you see stories like that all over the world, right? And I think the foreign domestic worker really, faces the brunt of it in many cases, I would say.
I think it's also because, again, like I said, it's this type of work is relegated to the lower ranks of the labor market, and it's not regulated. I think regulation is something.
I think in Singapore, it's I would say it's far more advanced in that sense. So there are regulations, there are checks, there are we've seen several instances of cases in the media where the foreign domestic worker has filed a case, supported by NGOs, and has won it. So I think there is a regulation. But again, I have to say that in some cases, there are women who are not educated and are getting into this role. But in other cases, there are women from India, from Indonesia, etc., who are educated. They've done their college, and they're still doing this role because it's well paid in their cultural or economic context. It's a well paid role. So there is that. But I think all governments can do more to regulate it. Absolutely, to protect their lot.
Tanushree?
Yeah, I think that, obviously in my life here, day-to-day life here, I don't have as much exposure to that segment. It's not just very common. It's not, but of course there are a lot of Latina workers who come here, and it is very similar stories. The thing is that anytime there is turmoil, the most vulnerable get affected the most. So the question is that if you don't have social justice systems in place, or social protection nets, then people who are the most vulnerable will fall through. And I know you asked about transnational domestic workers. I was reading some reports on the domestic workers in India, who are the citizens of the same nation. And obviously it's not just India, it's probably many countries. They don't have any protection. They don't have, salary guarantees. They don't have holidays that has been the days off that they're supposed to receive. And I was reading a lot of them losing their job. Again, us versus them, there was a lot of fear. Obviously with COVID, some of that fear is justified, not because of who they are or any class equation, just because of additional exposure, right? But however, what you can do because of that fear to another human in terms of, just getting rid of their income, putting them in a very vulnerable situation, just throwing them out, not having any kind of protection net that could take them through, causes severe marginalization in the society. And the effects are actually, very, very far reaching, that destabilizes their families, just like migrant worker men losing jobs and leaving cities affects them back. Similar here, one of the things I didn't mention, but it's very important to mention, one of the effects of COVID has been high increase of domestic violence on women.
True.
And not just certain segments, all segments. It has been in France, it has been in India. Again, when women lost their income and they are at the home, their economic vulnerability creates social vulnerability, and social vulnerability creates economic vulnerability. So I think that it's not something that I personally believe will happen, honestly, but I do think that if there is safety nets for social justice, and if human thinking can evolve with some awareness to us versus them, versus understanding that, you know, today if I destabilize certain communities, certain workers, create further poverty in my nation, it actually destabilizes the economy, causes worse living conditions for me, no matter how rich I am today. If the big picture can be viewed, that's the only way out, probably.
I think media has a huge role to play in that. And another thing, Tanushree, that you mentioned was social protection. I think this term, you know, not many women or many of us are even aware, you know, in our part of the world, rather, you know, social protections are there in place in many countries in the West, but, you know, a structured social protection program is still lacking, you know, in our side of the world. So that is something, you know, governments and states should, you know, look into.
Yeah, and the thing is that, you know, even when there are laws and protections, there are implementation challenges, severe implementation challenges, and most people don't know about them. They don't know what protection they have. They don't know about what resources they have. So that's why, you know, before we can reach the nirvana of social protection, we also have to parallelly supplement it with human awareness of broader consequences. You know, I talked about cause and effect. One of the things that baffles me is that how short-sighted we can be as humans in terms of, you know, this is what I'm doing to this person today. I don't think this will come back and hit my life ever again, which is not true. This is not, and no one lives or can afford to live an isolated life anymore, really.
So it's more to do with accountability.
I think
yes,
just
accountability and awareness. Yeah.
I mean, look at the COVID vaccination situation, right? Yes, you know, not all countries have enough vaccines. So you're doing a bit of first among equals and all of that. But nobody's talking about the domestic worker, you know, you know, whether that be the woman worker in your house or, you know, any other foreign construction worker. No one's really talking about them except a few countries. Again, I have to say Singapore is leading the way because, you know, they've given vaccinations to everyone, regardless of what roles they play in society. But look at India, for example. So you're getting your family vaccinated, but you haven't got your helper vaccinated. So where don't you then run the risk of getting COVID? So, you know, to Tanushree's point, it's going to come back and hit you. So, you know, there is no policy there. The government isn't really taking a stance on it.
True. Which reminds me, you know, we came up with a special edition called the Faces of Resilience. And in that, you know, I spoke to a political female leader in Pakistan. And she basically, you know, she had to campaign so much for, you know, these people who basically the janitors and those who clean up the sewers to be, you know, to make them or, you know, to have them named as frontline workers because that's what they are. And she had to campaign for that and raise awareness.
Yeah.
That's the thing. You see, you tend to kind of completely ignore that, you know, ignore that side of the population and almost like they did not exist because you choose not to see them.
Exactly, you know? Exactly. Absolutely agree with you. So, so do you think cultural heritage is all about human experiences of socio-political actions and processes, the experiences of belonging, identity, representation, gender, marginalization, biases that are continuously contested as well as negotiated?
I think it's all of that. I think it's more because when we look at, especially when you look at intangible cultural heritage, right, which is passed down like orally, traditions that are passed down orally, and with migrants kind of moves countries as well. There is a huge element of personal narrative that comes into play there. So over time, that what we call heritage changes, right? And sometimes it takes on a form which is very different from the way culture evolves in the home country, because again now the contexts have changed, right? What the home country goes through and evolves as a process, as a result of it, is very different from the way the migrant evolves. When I moved to Singapore many years ago, my non-Indian friends took me to have what they considered Indian food, and it was called rojak. And I had never heard of rojak, and ultimately I found out what it was. So it's something like a fruit chaat, but it has elements of Indonesian and Malaysian cuisine as well in the ingredients, and so it's evolved, but it's also got the label that it's Indian, right? And so the Indian heritage in Singapore and Malaysia is very different from the Indian heritage in India, because they've evolved differently. So that happens, and that's of course food. But with that, I think personal narratives also change the heritage. It's the way you may feel about a community or about certain events in history is because you've been given that context by your family and by elders in your family, etc. Right? So you may look at it in a very different way, and like you said, bias forms as part of that. So yeah, personal narrative I think really changes heritage. So when you say, you and I could both be from the same country, but have very different cultural heritages.
True. Tanushree?
Yeah, to everything you said, Sabin, what I wanted to add was the personal, that it's a very personal concept, cultural heritage, which is not understood that much. I think who we are is really who we were, plus who we choose to become. So I think that there are some very strong cultural concepts that we bring with us, no matter where we go, but then the differentiated personal experiences actually add to it. And that is how, it defines, it forms. And I think there are some very beautiful things that emerge out of it. Like there is a cuisine I ate here called Chinese Mexican cuisine. I was at first shocked at like what is going on here. And then there were some historical context. I don't remember it very well right now, but there were some marriages that were happening between Asian communities and Latino communities in terms of that. And some of that had very strong economic reasons on why that was happening, how that was going on. And therefore, yes, there is this very strong concept of culture that people bring with them often. Many times when they go to a different land, that's what they want to hold on to dearly, because when they're faced with the pressure of having to conform to certain other norms, some of that they want to, but some of that when they don't want to, what they go back to is what they know. The only thing I will add is that often, culture is looked at as something like, I will lose it somehow, like religion, like if I don't fight for it, I will lose it. And I think that's probably a fear that we might need to relook at. And, yes, some of the traditional handicrafts, we have to fight for them. We lose it, there's a beautiful, but there is this morbid fear that I've seen in people, whether it comes to their religion or whether it's come to their cultural or heritage, that, if I don't devalue my human values just for the sake of holding on to them, I will lose it. And I kind of think like the more you fight for it, the more you lose it. So we probably should look at that fear a little bit more.
And I think, food and music, they are a beautiful result of, this intangible cultural heritage. When you eat, Pan-Asian food in Dubai, or you listen to music, fusion music by Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, or, like Chaya Chaya, which has some Western resonance in it, so it the diversity makes it so beautiful, right?
Absolutely. And there is one point I would like to add. not everything just because it's cultural heritage is beautiful and good, right? So if you have this fear of losing it, you actually become blind and you continue practices that you shouldn't have, that causes severe social problems. And often actually you continue those practices because you don't fully understand the history, right? So monogamy, or the concept of woman's purity, or a woman's allegiance to the husband and how they show it in the Hindu narrative, and and the caste aspect of this, the Brahminical patriarchal historical context, how that got really very designed into implementation by humans in terms of, hey, this is what your supposed behavior should be and shouldn't be, often is not known. People think these are coming from God and this is what they were like, the human race was born with. The problem is that when you don't open yourself to evolution, you start becoming more and more blind to things that you should probably lose. Migration is a beautiful opportunity to actually lose what is not working anymore for the human race.
True. Absolutely true.
Yeah. But conversely, people try to stick on to it. It's like if I let go of that, I'm letting go of my ties to my home country. It's
like a betrayal.
It's like a betrayal, right? And but I have to say the internet is a great equalizer, so you may be trying to protect your children from this alien heritage and trying to imbibe your heritage into it, but they are listening to K-pop today. So They are taking cultural influences from some other culture.
Exactly.
And that's going to be the world tomorrow, right? So it's quite interesting that how you're going to hit a middle ground in all of this, between your home country culture, your host country culture, and some other culture.
I think that's a great point, because whenever we're even when I'm speaking with my husband about this migration and stuff, are we in denial? Maybe globalization is natural and organic, and us making these borders and structures just to contain us, it's just power play in action. Or am I just being
I personally think that we are definitely into some mode of denial now. I don't know if it's a mass phenomenon. I think there is definitely a prevalent phenomenon. I don't think, like Sanghamitra said, I don't think that an isolated identity is possible or existence is possible. Whatever we are trying to preserve, of course, we should preserve the beautiful things. We should also evolve and learn. But whatever we are trying to protect ourselves from, just by thinking of ourselves, is not going to work out in reality unless you want to really become stagnant as an economy. It's not so much as a social concept anymore, even, right? Like, for example, if US chooses to have really home workers or onshore workers, and there is going to be a cost and a quality impact to it. There is just not going to be a way for them the corporations to be profitable the way they were. This is an economic question, right? I think that really the way is that you need to accept this and you need to embrace this. And you still need to, after embracing it, design solutions that will work best for your nation or whatever. I personally think that all this national and these questions should be a logistical issue, that look, it's difficult to manage a bigger thing. So we're looking at chunks more than an identity issue, So that's my thought, that we definitely are prolonging things longer and making things difficult for us. For example, when there was this initial, this ban on vaccine IP or ban on vaccine export versus certain kind of export, still there are certain things. People do not understand that if the entire population of the world does not get vaccinated, no one is safe. So it will not matter, because the virus will mutate in certain things and come back to haunt us, like it's happening with Delta. So it's a futile battle. It's almost like, you are trying to lock the door very hard, but all the windows are open, so that's my thought.
Sanghamitra?
Now, I don't think I have anything to add. Tanushree said it so beautifully, but absolutely. Firstly, I don't think it's a choice. Countries think they have a choice. I don't think they have a choice, because even if you lock down your country, COVID found a way of reaching, right? So lockdowns don't work. But this has shown how cultures could very easily, very quickly get inclusive. I mean, well, not inclusive, close the borders, close their hearts, I would say, to everything else, because suddenly we want to protect only ours. And that's a very, I would say it's a primal sort of feeling. So if you would only be open to accepting new things if there is a safe environment. And I think that's the challenge. It's creating that safe environment so that people can accept and be open, physically, mentally, to accept new things. That's the challenge.
That's true. I'll go to my last question, and then if there's any last words, or if we have Radhika here as well, if she has any questions. So my last question is, do you think sustained relationships of exchange between individuals, between and within families and households, institutions and social movements in a transnational space shape gendered relationships? Sanghamitra,
it does, right? We don't live in a shell. So whether we like it or not, the gender situation in our host country and our home countries influences the relationships within our family, right? For example, there's a I would say a popular notion within Asian communities that Western concepts and Western, philosophy corrupts, and we should shield our children from, so-called Western influences. But you never, like we discussed till now, you're not going to be able to do that. So you have to, somehow you've got to hit that middle ground. Sometimes the immediate family model or the immediate family group that you have is able to accept it. But what they're not comfortable with is how do they break that to their extended family? It's like, I'll allow you to do whatever you want to do in our country, but when you go back home, whatever that home country, you've got to kind of fall into that old traditional pattern, because we can't sort of, we can't bring our extended family across with that change. So sometimes it's that as well, because everyone adapts to, or everyone's on a different change journey, and the speed of that journey is very different. So that happens, I think, and so you may change, gender roles may transform in the host country, but you tend to fall back into the same pattern the moment you have, your home country starts influencing it.
True.
Is the way I see it.
Tanushree?
Yeah, absolutely. I do think that anyone who does not understand or adopt it is, whether it's a whatever unit that is, whether it's family level, whether it's a community level, whether it's a national level, will either become stagnated, like certain countries that have been there for a long time, stuck in there, or become grounds of breeding conflict, or it's going to be, they just are going to become extinct, right? Just look at certain ways of living, certain cults or certain groups who have lived very restricted living and has tried to protect themselves from outside. It is not that they really grew and evolved and perished. Most of them either had to isolate themselves completely and live a very different way of living, or that way of living slowly died. So like Sanghamitra beautifully said, yes, everyone is at a different journey, at a different pace, but we have to be on that journey. And we really have to find a way to educate ourselves, to understand the context, and to separate facts from opinions, and really try to practice what I call a more human thinking, or a big picture thinking. If we just do a very short-sighted, and this goes to the vaccine debate in the US, right? I do have a lot of folks who basically say things like, why should I get vaccinated? Why should I introduce something into my body that can harm me? The problem is that, there is no me here. And a herd immunity concept does not work with if everyone is a me there, right? It's really a more we concept. I am, as I said, I often get baffled on how short-sighted or, vertical thinking wise we humans can be. And what you asked as the question, there is no vertical thinking here. It all has to be like a horizontal thinking across all verticals.
Great. So, Radhika, do you have any questions?
I have a zillion actually. Thank you for that wonderful discussion. My mind is abuzz with ideas and questions. So thank you, Sabin. Thank you, Tanushree. Thank you, Sanghamitra. I do have a lot of questions, and I might just pop over to Tanushree's page and Sanghamitra's page, start that conversation again later. But I think a very important thought that I usually walk away with these kind of sessions. I mean, every time I have such a wonderful discussion, such a deep and such a, we discuss such large issues, I walk away with a very dichotomous mind, because I know that there's so much that needs to be done. And there's a very overpowering sense of, is it ever going to be done? Because it's just too much. And who's doing it? And who even cares about it? And I think the only way I've learned to come around is stoicism helps. Thinking about it is what it is helps. But then I also realized that at the end of it, our locus of control or our sphere is pretty much just us, right? So when I walk away, I hear about all these wonderful things and I say, no, the world is not going to change overnight. These issues still might be there 10 years later, but I can just make sure that I will not be a part of those issues and I will choose to do whatever I can. So when we talk about all these issues of living into a globalized world, we can keep on having these wonderful conversations, which is great. And we can also keep on extending our sphere of influence. For example, my sphere of influence is my husband and my son, right? So husband is incorrigible. Let's just keep it to my son. So, so my son, I tell him that you're going to move out into a world, you're going to meet different people, but that's the bigger idea, that you get used to different kind of people in the world right now. You learn to accept them the way they are so that they learn to accept you. Every time we talk about acceptance, we're not getting acceptance for who we are. I think we should just take a look and around and see how many people are we giving acceptance the way they are. So I said, you know what, Neil, we're going to start the process backward. You are going to first start accepting everybody the way they are. And then the universe will bring acceptance to you. So I'm again walking away with a lot of thoughts here where I have a lot to ponder over, but your conversation has given me a hope that at least I can work on myself. I can work on my son. I can work on my family. And if all of us do that, it's not going to magically go away, but it will get better. And that's the whole point, right?
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with you. Any last words, Sanghamitra and Tanushree?
Well, I will just say that, oh, go ahead, Sanghamitra.
No, go ahead, Tanushree, please.
All I was going to say that, as I said in the beginning, world has been through more difficult times. When I heard this long time back, I really don't know who said this, but I keep it with me. One is that when you are fighting for change, it's very important to remember that you might not see change in your lifetime. And the other thing is what Radhika said, and this is of course Gandhi, we can all be the change that we want to see in the world, right? So in the question of sphere of influence, it's very important to remember, yes, we cannot change the world. Many horrible things are still going to happen around us, but we can just maybe, starting with just us and our immediate sphere of influence, make some commitments to aware ourselves better and make choices that are more human than personal, or individual interest oriented.
Sanghamitra?
Very true. I think both Radhika and Tanushree said all the things that I wanted to say, but I think I'll just pick up something that Tanushree said, that, break it up into small blocks. So I was at a recent D&I session where, one of our team members asked, okay, I keep hearing this word inclusion, like, what can I do? What can we do? So I said, I thought a bit and then I said, okay, 3 things really. Very simple, small things, don't mispronounce people's names. I get a lot of that. It came from my heart. My name is always mispronounced. So, don't mispronounce people's names. Ask them how it's pronounced, respect that. Secondly, don't interrupt people when they're speaking. Don't talk over people. They are like simple things, right? The person feels disrespected. And therefore, the third one I borrowed from my daughter, and she keeps telling me this: don't be judgy. Like, don't judge.
Absolutely.
Right. So I feel that if these are 3 things that we can do in our immediate family and social circle and ourselves, because it's a journey for all of us, right? We all have this unconscious bias of some form or the other. It's just being mindful, recognizing that, and doing these 3 things. So I'm trying to practice the 3 things myself. And that's what I'd like to leave our listeners today with.
This has been an amazing conversation. Tanushree, quoted Gandhiji, and it reminded me of a musician that I love. He's controversial, Michael Jackson, and the song was Man in the Mirror. So, it resonates so much, you have to start with, changing the man in the mirror. So, each of us, if we realize we have empathy, we can do so much more. Thank you so much, Sanghamitra, Tanushree, for this amazing conversation. And last but not the least, I want to thank Radhika as well for sharing her thoughts. Thank you so much, and until next time.